I just couldn't resist this study in part because I know several of the authors in the very long author list and how hard they were working on this project before we all started working from home in March. So when it came out late this year, it just struck me as one that had to be shared with you all. The title of the paper, it's in Nature, an unexpectedly large count of trees in the West African Sahara and Sahel areas. Um, uh, Basically, it's a pretty inhospitable place to work. And so one of the leads that I associated with at Goddard, Compton Jim Tucker, and a number of his long-term colleagues, he tells me, figured out a way to collect the high resolution sort of national security level imagery, which is available for NASA research, and to put together the coverage needed to map trees over 1.3 million square kilometers. So I'm a cold weather kind of guy. I understand the deserts can get cold, but I would not want to be out in the field under any circumstances trying to count the trees across 1.3 million square kilometers. That's 500,000 square miles. So it's a really impressive feat. There's a lot of reasons to do this. Some of those are captured in the bullet points. But especially in these marginal areas, those trees have simply not been focused on, and in part because early remote sensing imagery just didn't have enough resolution to do much there. So they focused on more contiguous forests elsewhere, like rainforests and such. So this is a real achievement when they could map 1.8 billion individual trees greater than 3 meters squared in crown area. So this is not tree height, but I happen to know that they are working on stereo imagery as well that will eventually, once they figure out how to run it through the supercomputer that generated these results, should generate a whole lot of tree height data to go with the crown area data. So just imagine 11,000 sub-meter resolution satellite images. We're talking 50 centimeters typically from the series of sensors that they used. So a lot of data storage, a lot of data processing, and the key thing is the algorithm that was used was trained by the folks that I work with, who measured almost 90,000 trees individually on those images in a transect from the driest part of the area to the wetter part of the area. So as you can see in one of the lower bullet points, very few trees per hectare in a hyper-arid area, less than 1 per hectare, to almost 10 in the arid, to 30 plus trees in the semi-arid, and to approaching 50 trees in the subhuman areas. So even 47 trees per hectare is not a lot of tree coverage. So it is a real research success being able to count that many trees across such a large area using these new techniques. So it's just a really cool thing to do. The authors go on to suggest that this would be a way to monitor trees outside of forests globally. I think that is an admirable goal, as you'll see in some of the images coming up here. The contrast between the fairly barren soil and the tree cover aided this study, I think. So go to the next slide, Brian. So there in West Africa is the red box, which is shown in more detail with some tree density data plotted on top of it, and the different climate zones from arid to subhumid, getting close to the tropical rainforest areas that are shown in the upper left panel as bright green and darker green areas. So you can get an illustration from basically the captured areas shown in the green subpanels, how the density varies as you go across this region. So it's, as I said before, it's an area that the early Landsat type remote sensing data simply just didn't have the resolution to resolve. 30-meter pixels, 30 meters on a side, that is, just can't capture these sub 10-meter tree canopy or tree crown areas. So this kind of my hat's off to the people that thought up this study and generated the resources to gather all the data together and process it. These are people I know well from when I was back in Building 33. And so it's a tip of the hat to them to show off their work here. Let's move to the next slide. So here's some of their sort of training data where they're going in and they're counting trees, measuring tree crown areas, and feeding that into the algorithm. This is a visualization from SVS, which I'm going to drop in the chat here, so you can follow. You can pick this up after this talk later, and it's just, I just think it's astounding that they were able to figure out how to do this. Next slide. So there we go, from the hyper-arid to the arid, semi-arid, subhumid areas in the countries of West Africa that are covered. Again, these are visuals which you can find at the Scientific Visualization Studio here at Goddard that generated this summary of the study that we're about to see. Next slide. And there's that trees per hectare. One of the things that is suggested here, but is not documented, is how does the soil productivity vary across the area? So that's one of the things that grabbed me, being coming from the geology side of things, is that there's clearly some relationship that's more complicated than just rainfall alone. But that would require field work because as far as I know, nobody's figured out how to characterize soil productivity remotely, at least not over vast areas, even with high resolution satellite data. So I think the last slide is the SVS animation. Oh, there's some links that give you more detail. There were some press releases put out by NASA, and they give you essentially all those details. And there's a sort of an illustration of the test data that they used to assess the algorithms results, and where they actually checked the work of the algorithm essentially. So that's pretty cool. And somewhere in there should be the link to the animation that I just put in the chat. Maybe it's the next slide, Brian, or is one of those. There's one of those live. One of those links should be live.
Let me see if it opens up well on here.
Or just get the one out of the chat. That should work.
I'm gonna do this here because it's easier to do it this way.
Yep.
Alrighty.
So anyway, a pretty astonishing achievement that I thought deserved some time with us.
This one here, correct?
Yep.
All right, let me play this.
Yep.
Ready? Here we go.
Scientists from NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, along with their international collaborators, have demonstrated a new method for mapping the location and size of trees growing outside of forests. The big surprise? They discovered an unexpectedly high number of trees in semi-arid regions, often thought of as too dry to support plant life. Mapping non-forest trees with this level of precision was
Whoops.
previously impossible
Buffering.
across broad.
Yeah, it must be a slow SVS right now.
Well, at any rate, everybody
Yeah.
has access to the link and they can pull that, and take a look at
This
the
technology.
picture.
Yep, I'm gonna stop sharing that. It looks like SVS is a little slow right now.
They have been known to have issues because they have so many large animations there that,
Yeah.
at any rate, thanks for traveling to West Africa with me and taking a look at sort of revolutionary research.